Viewer discretion is advised. 8 years is a long time. In 8 years, we had a new president, nearly an entire console generation, people's lives changing as anything else would, and the wait between Sly 3 and Thieves in Time. I started playing Sly Cooper at a pretty young age. The first game was even the first 3D platformer I ever played, and I kept playing these games throughout my childhood. I didn't have to wait 8 years between games like everyone else, maybe like 3 or 4 years, but by the time Thieves in Time came out, I was 14. I was a teenager. Tastes change. I learned to love different games. It's safe to say that I at least wasn't a kid anymore. I definitely wasn't an adult yet, and I honestly still don't feel like one, but I grew into a different person in between playing Sly 3 and Thieves in Time. Despite all this change in the world and in myself, in those years in between games, one thing couldn't have changed. I was hyped as hell for Sly Cooper Thieves in Time. I was at the age where I followed games before their release. I went on IGN, made a bunch of cringy comments, I read Game Informer, I watched speculative YouTube videos, I did the whole shebang for this game. February 5th could not come soon enough. Thieves in Time did have a new developer, but from what we saw, the game looked promising. For those who don't know, the first 3 Sly games were made by Sucker Punch. They previously worked on Rocket Robot on Wheels for the N64, which I hear was pretty good, and would later go on to make Infamous and Ghost of Tsushima. I probably said that wrong, I'll be honest. Thieves in Time was developed by Sanzaru Games. They not only ported the originals over to PS3, but they also worked on Secret Agent Clank and some other Wii games I'd never heard of. But they were more recently known for Sonic Boom, Shattered Crystal, and helping develop Spyro Year the Dragon Reignited. An interesting portfolio. But hey, that didn't matter to 14-year-old Nick. A new Sly game was coming, and it looked to be fantastic. That's all I cared about. And just the icing on this hype cake, it was $40 instead of $60. February 5th came, and over the course of the next few days, I would know my first true disappointment in life. No, really, I'd say I had it easy. Good, loving parents, I got good grades easily, no major health problems, physical or mental. But this is probably the first game I ever played where I finished it and felt completely empty inside. Now, I had played games that I didn't enjoy before, but at this point in time, I could play basically any game from one of my favorite series and feel satisfied by the end. Pokemon, Kirby, Zelda, Mario, but Sly Cooper broke that security for me. And it wasn't even that I didn't enjoy the game, it's just that it ruined whatever conclusiveness Sly 3 gave us. Sly 3's ending felt like a conclusive end of the series, while Thieves in Time ends on a cliffhanger that still hasn't been resolved. And it wasn't just me either. Thieves in Time is considered to be the worst game in the series by fans. This is the bad one, as they say. But it's been 7 years, I've moved on. If a cliffhanger ending on a series about a thieving raccoon is enough to give me depression at this age, given whatever the hell kind of January we had, then maybe I should rethink my life choices. I haven't finished Thieves in Time since my first playthrough all those years ago, I just didn't feel the need to. I did try again a few years ago, but I just couldn't, and fans of this series probably know why. So, here I am, writing this introductory segment on the eve of the 7-year anniversary of this game, and I'm actually excited to jump back in. Like I said, it's been 7 years, I'm not one to hold a grudge, and the game to this game was actually pretty great from what I remember. They even fixed some of the issues I had with the previous games. I'm not expecting Thieves in Time to be better than any of the other games of the series, but with massive disappointment long behind me, this game might be one that I actually really enjoy. Or maybe I'll end up remembering why I never bothered to finish it a second time. Only one way to find out which. After a brief explanation of what happened at the end of Sly 3, you know, Sly faking amnesia to be with Cormelian and all that, Sly eventually gets that old thieving itch again. Somehow. Like, considering he threw away his whole life to be with this woman, I find it odd that he just as easily go back to it. He's had his eyes on an art collector, supposedly getting his art off the black market. While investigating this guy, Bentley shows up as if right on cue. It turns out that the pages of the Thievius Raccoonus are disappearing, so Bentley tracked down Murray, who is more than happy to help out. With the gang back together, Bentley just casually reveals that he's invented time travel and they were going to use it to fix history. But in order to use it, you need an object from that era. So they've got to sneak into this art museum and steal a dagger from feudal Japan. Oh, and Penelope's gone missing too. Probably due to a time paradox or something. At least that's what I thought on my first playthrough. And where was Carmelita doing all this? Oh, you know, still under the impression that Sly had amnesia. Yeah, despite this whole family-shattering thing he has to go fix, Sly never thought to just come clean to her before partaking in this endeavor. Kinda reminds me how in Uncharted 4, Nate just doesn't mention the whole gotta go on another adventure thing to his wife and it ends up blowing up in his face later on. What is it with Sony games having protagonists that lie to their significant other in the 4th entry? Seriously, don't be that guy. or girl. I try not to discriminate. But anyway, just like Nathan Drake, it ends up blowing up in Sly's face. Because it turns out that the case Carmelita's been so caught up in is the shady museum owner. Carmelita dramatically shows up just as Sly steals the dagger. Also, her time spent in Paris made her Spanish accent thicker for some reason.
Sly Cooper, you no good lying thief! I'm locking you up for good!
With the dagger in hand, they pull off a Back to the Future parody and successfully end up in feudal Japan to help out Ryoichi Cooper. But it's obvious pretty quickly that they're not the only ones with a time machine. Almost as soon as they get to Japan, they find out that some modern-day military general by the name of El Jefe is here causing trouble. Each of the villains this time don't have a unique goal or anything. They're all trying to mess up each of Sly's ancestors and steal their cane. They're all working for that old collector from before, La Paradox. You even get to see some of the villains in silhouettes in the first mission. It's kinda cool, but definitely not to the extent that Sly 2 did. You don't actually know much about La Paradox for most of the game. He's not even in the game until 5 episodes in. All we know is that he's trying to erase the Coopers from history and trying to steal their canes. That's basically it. But hey, credit where credit is due. I was intrigued. I forgot who this guy was, and I wanted to know what was up. There was an air of mystery about this guy that I really liked. The villains this time aren't overly interesting, but they were likable. I like how Paradox actually sent these guys to time periods they're interested in. Like, yeah, let's send the military general to one of the most militaristic countries in history, or send the mobster obsessed with cowboy movies into the Old West. My favorite villain this time was the Grizz, who was a failed artist that got sent to the Stone Age so he could dig up his own art and sell them for a fortune. And I just love this dude's name too, along with how he practically raps whenever he talks. This dude just had a ton of character. Miss Decibel I really like too. She can play music out of her trunk so badly that she can actually mind control people. The Black Knight being some dude wearing robotic armor in medieval Europe is cool on paper, but he's the worst villain in the series by far. Trust me, I'll get to him later. And that's basically what this game's structure is. You go to some new time period, help out one of Sly's ancestors, take down some villain along the way, and conveniently get something so you can move on to the next one. Kinda weird how easily they believe Sly's are descendant from the future though. I get helping them out anyway, but Jesus, they just believe some seemingly random dude, what the hell. Sly's family is pretty likable at least. Ryoichi, the guy who invented the spider jump, probably has the least personality though. He's like, I am a ninja. Like, dude, we get it. But to be fair, it feels like a gag more than anything. My favorite had to be Tennessee Kid Cooper. He feels like some ragtag outlaw dude, and he's just hilarious to listen to.
Son, who is it you keep talking to?
I have a thing in my ear that lets me talk to my friend. And now he's telling me you need to carry some of that TNT so we can blow the gate.
Sure, I got voices in my head telling me to blow things up too. They've been right so far. Let's get to it.
I really liked Gallup as well. He's some headstrong knight that just rushes into danger to the point where he's a big old goof. Between him and Tennessee, I really wish these guys were in more than one episode. I love seeing Sly's ancestors because of how much character these guys had. They could have easily been Sly clones personality-wise, but they're so different from him that each one stands out on their own. I like that. Along with them, Salim ended up being really likable too. He was one of the 40 thieves, but they all went into retirement except for him and like 3 others. He tends to complain a lot, but I just liked having this old, almost burnt out thief that's seen it all by this point. The only ancestor I wasn't big on was Caveman Cooper, who they just called Bob. He talks in caveman speak with subtitles, but even with subtitles, he's just not that interesting to me. He's pretty much that dumb Oonga Boonga caveman kind of character. He was the only one I didn't mind not seeing more of. He's also been retconned to be the first Cooper instead of Slide and Common. Some fans really don't like this, but I see him more as Slide and Common was the first Master Thief. Even then, he's still sort of the thieviest raccoonist, so it's not like he wouldn't be known for anything other than just being the first. But character-wise, the ancestors aren't the issue. The problem with the characters this time is the main cast. They just don't feel like themselves. Sly always had those witty one-liners, but they don't have the same kind of, I don't know, tone as they did before. Sly tends to come off as more of a smug asshole in this game, not so much the sly thief we usually see him as. He's constantly cracking jokes, and almost in an annoying kind of way. Like, dude, can you just be halfway serious for like 5 seconds? Please. Murray comes off as more of a loud, dumb guy, kind of like how Knuckles is in a lot of modern Sonic games. He's not like an idiot or anything, but something about his personality just seems off. Bentley, at least, feels mostly like himself, although he's got a weird obsession with puns all of a sudden.
Well, that was a blast. Time to get rolling.
Good job, Sly. Time for me to open up a can of Whoop-Asky.
Okay, that was good. Carmelita's definitely gotten the worst out of the main four. While Paradox sends her back to the Old West, and she and Tennessee end up having to save the gang after they got captured by Sawtooth. Carmelita actually ends up joining the gang this time after finding out how all these villains are working with the Paradox, which again she's investigating. She was always a stoic, no BS kind of girl, but she's overly bitchy and angry this time. And hey, I get that she's pissed at Sly for lying to her, and I just want to point out that she lied to him too, which she can at least admit to, but she won't shut up about it.
Right now, I need to rescue that ringtail, so I can wring his neck. The Fleabag tried to feed me some story about having to rob the museum to save the future. But I was done listening to that liar. After all, you're not exactly trustworthy, are you?
You're mad at Sly. We get it. She eventually cools down about it, but it really makes her character annoying for most of the game. And hey, she does grow a newfound respect for Sly's work since they both have the same goal, albeit from different sides of the law, but they really could have gone without mentioning how mad she is at Sly every 5 seconds. I also like how she gets to interact with the gang more. Yeah, outside of one conversation with Murray, she's only ever talked to Sly, but for some reason she immediately knew who Bentley was despite never talking to him or even knowing he exists. I would have assumed Sly told her about him, but fake amnesia, so that wasn't it. But that's not too big of a plot hole, especially compared to the real plot holes later on, which I'm getting into eventually, don't worry. But most of these character differences are pretty subtle, save for Carmelita. A casual player might not even notice on their first playthrough unless you're really paying attention. I sure as hell didn't. Overall, the slightly out of character main cast didn't end up bothering me much, but it was something still worth talking about. And I'm sure you've noticed by now, but I've got to talk about this amazing presentation. This game looks fantastic. They really nailed that cartoon aesthetic, and it runs at 60 FPS too. What wizards are working at Sanzaru? This game did come out near the end of the PS3's life, but it's gotta be said, this is one of the best looking games on the system. You at least can't deny how well aged the game looks. Thieves in Time makes the previous games look downright ugly by comparison. It's hard to tell this game came out 7 years ago. How do they make a game looking this good that also runs this well? There is some slowdown in areas, but it's about 60 enough to where I don't mind. The animations are way better this time too. Most of the cutscenes aren't just characters standing around with the same few animations like before. Even in Binocucom conversations, characters are properly animated. The game has a great attention to detail too, like these torture devices in Japan that are using feathers and boots. I just love how this dude is continually getting slapped in the face. And there was one cutscene I noticed where the camera nodded back and forth as Salim shook his head no. It's just stuff that you wouldn't think of initially. Sometimes it's the little things you can appreciate. Clockwork even shows up in the background of specific missions. That is cool, but he looks a little too derpy to be menacing. And why is he in the Stone Age? Wasn't he first president of nation Egypt? Unless you're trying to tell me that Clockwork had access to time travel too. Wait. He's a robotic owl in ancient Egypt and feudal Japan. That would make sense, actually. I'm not sure if that's what they were implying, but it always felt weird having this robotic owl way before technology. So that would make much more sense if that's what they were going for. Although that's just speculation on my part. And god damn, this UI is slick. Like, I know it's weird to be gushing about the menus and HUD looking so good, but man, it adds so much charm. Another thing about this series that reminds me of Persona 5. Look, just play Life Will Change and get it over with. This is the last time I've compared Sly Cooper to Persona, I swear. Thieves in Time's music is quite a bit better too. I was surprised. It almost gave me a James Bond spy movie kind of vibe at times. And my god, these animated cutscenes look great too. And there's a lot more of them than in previous games. There would usually be about 2 per episode, but there's at least 3 per episode this time. I just love how well animated they all are. A real step up from the somewhat static ones from previous games. My only real issue is that the character designs can look kinda weird at times. Mainly Dimitri, like just look at this dude. Although Dimitri doesn't get any lines in this game, he's just kinda there in cutscenes. And speaking of character designs, I don't know, they made the female characters a little too sexy? Like, they gave Penelope a jumpsuit instead of those mechanic overalls, and Carmelita has even less clothes than before. It's not an issue or anything, but it's definitely noticeable. They certainly know their audience. I'm still amazed at Mount Free. It wasn't just the presentation that got a huge boost either, the general gameplay feels better to play. This is hard to describe. The movement in this game just feels good. Damn good. Even when you shift to a third-person shooter for some characters, the game never feels anything but smooth to play. I've only got 2 real complaints with the controls though. The paraglider feels too slow, and defeating enemies doesn't have the same impact as before. With a paraglider, it feels like something's pushing me back, it just doesn't feel right. And I don't need to explain why defeated enemies don't have the same impact, just show it. Who knew that trumpets can make such a difference? But otherwise, this game controls smooth as butter. Honestly, one of the better controlling 3D platformers I've played. Like, my god, if they ever make another game, they don't have to change much. This feels like a much more modern game than the first 3. I wasn't expecting to have as much fun just moving around as I did. I also didn't expect to see so many pure platforming segments. Sly's always been a platformer, don't get me wrong, but ever since the second game, it's been more focused on having a more mission-based structure. You didn't go into more linear levels very often, and if you did, you were still focused on some kind of objective, not so much platforming through obstacles and getting to the end. The bigger emphasis on linear levels really reminded me of the first game. There's still the more objective-based missions in the overworld, but there won't nearly as many of them. For a platformer, I liked this more platforming-focused design, and with the smaller cast, Thieves in Time felt like a mix between the first 2 games. You'll mostly be playing as either Sly or one of his ancestors as well, just like Sly 2. There weren't as many mini-games this time either. They were there, but more sparse. Thieves in Time felt more focused on pure platforming, with some stealth still mixed in, of course. There's a clear emphasis on giving you worlds and levels that are fun to platform through instead of doing various objectives. And with how good the platforming in this game feels, that was a nice change. I missed the more platforming style of the first game, so Thieves in Time gives you more of that, while still having those sandbox style overworlds and mission-based objectives. But I keep mentioning Sly's ancestors, so let's talk about how those guys play. Each of his ancestors have Sly's base moveset, but they have some other kind of ability as well. But they don't have any gadgets to buy, so you won't be picking up any upgrades for them. And while they can only be used in their respective time periods, they're used enough to where you don't mind. Ryuichi can launch himself from point to point while spiral jumping, and can sprint without alerting guards. Because, you know, he's a ninja. Seriously man, calm down about your ninja status. Galuf can launch himself from hooks way farther than Sly can. Salim can climb ropes really fast? That's boring. At least he has this nifty flying corbett for a paraglider. That was a really nice touch. Tennessee was my favorite gameplay-wise. He's literally just Sly with a gun. That's it. It's amazing. His crack shot that lets him shoot up to 6 targets in quick succession at least stops him from being too similar. Although I find it odd how that he can't run on rails like Sly can if you buy the upgrade. But otherwise, he's the best ancestor in my opinion. Bob is the only one that doesn't get any of Sly's super sneaky thief moves. This guy can't do much of anything, really. He's a much stronger, slower Sly that can climb specific walls. Bob's the only one I didn't like playing as. The climbing sections were fine, but he's otherwise just a Murray that does less damage due to not having Fists of Flames. As for the main cast, they've changed a bit too. Sly's disguises have been replaced by costumes. You've even got one from each episode. There's a samurai costume that makes you immune to fire and lets you sneak past guards, a jailbird costume that gives you a big iron ball that you can use to push blocks, and you can even roll on the ball to get past grounded laser grids, a tiger skin that lets you leap toward enemies or dummies, an ultra that can make tight ropes off the arrows you shoot, and a thief outfit that lets you slow down time. Man, that was a sentence. Yeah, I totally did that in one take. But these costumes added some nice variety to Sly's gameplay without feeling too complex. You can actually go back to previous areas and use newer costumes to find more collectibles. It gives the collection aspect more of a Metroidvania feel to it that I really liked. Going back to previous episodes is still optional, of course. Murray feels mostly the same as last time, but due to the new gadget system, he's a total powerhouse and can kill just about any normal enemy in 1 to 2 hits. He doesn't have his ball form from last time though, and speaking of which, there's not even a mention of the Guru, other than this charm on Murray's binocular and a picture in the Parasite out. But anyway, Bentley likes Dr. Octavius a little too much, so he made these cool-ass extendo arms, so he can use bombs much more easily. You can drop them directly into enemy pockets too. You can throw bombs as well without needing special ones, and just for good measure, he can pickpocket just like Sly can. He doesn't get 4 jumps this time, but he does get this hover that lets him jump further. His sleep darts, and bombs for that matter, have different ammo types, so he can put enemies to sleep without needing to go into first person, or he can just use darts like a gun. That's fun. Bentley isn't quite as versatile as before, but he's still pretty fun. He's got more hacking minigames this time too. I've never talked about these. Occasionally, you play a twin-stick shooter to hack stuff. It was pretty neat, but I'd never felt the need to bring it up. You still have those ones, but it's expanded with different vehicle types. I love the new Tron aesthetic to it as well. That's super cool. There's also a 2D shooter where you can increase your weapon level with these power-ups scattered about. It's also like Cave Story, where if you take damage, your weapons level down, rewarding better gameplay. These ones were my favorite of the hacking games is a lot more action-based, which is a much better fit for this kind of game. The third one was my least favorite. You move around a ball with the gyroscope, yeah, the gyroscope, through a small obstacle course before time runs out. I don't know, I just don't care for these ones, but they're so short and easy that it's hard to be upset about them. The only thing I don't care for is the forced gyroscope use. It's like those gyro puzzles in Breath of the Wild. I don't mind it as an option, but I don't see why I can't just use the analog stick instead. There's actually a few ports that make you use the gyro. Just having the option for buttons instead would be appreciated. Carmelita makes the return as a playable character. She's much less overpowered than she was before, and you play as her even less. I think there was maybe like 3 ports where you play as her, and one of those was just a shooting section where you couldn't move. You can play as her whenever you want now, but she really isn't as fun as she was before. When you only play as her 3 times, it brings up the same issue as some Sly 3 characters had. You don't even play as Sly's ancestors this little. This isn't a big deal, to be clear. I just wish they had made better use out of her. Having a character based more around shooting could lead to some cool gameplay segments, and they did this with Tennessee instead. But at least they knew you wouldn't play as her much and didn't give her many gadgets to buy, just a super jump and different firing types. But speaking of gadgets, they got a huge overhaul this time. Instead of having a gadget grid with different abilities that you'll never use, most gadgets are passive upgrades. New moves and abilities to use mostly. Each character has some kind of ammo type too. Bentley has different bomb types, Murray has different punching types, and Carmelita gets different firing types. The gadget meter also automatically refills now. That's convenient. There's a ton of gadgets to buy this time, but unlike Sly 3, there's a ton of treasures to steal. You can buy just about all the gadgets by stealing these, which is what Sly 3 was missing. You don't need to buy every gadget or anything, but when you need to get something that's required, it makes it much more bearable to obtain. You can get some good stuff early on too. You get your paraglider and silent obliteration before the end of the first episode, which is great. The treasures aren't the only collectibles either. The clues are back, thank God. They work how they did in Sly 2. There's 30 in each episode around the safe house. Find all 30 and you open a safe. If you have trouble finding clues, get the safe for episode 3 first. You'll get an item that just reveals all of them on the map. I didn't end up finding all the clues, but this is great for giving you something to do around the overworlds. There was also masks hidden about that unlock optional costumes. I think they're a little too tedious to try and find without a guide, but I appreciate the added replay value. I especially like how the late rewards let you use Ratchet's wrench or Cole's amp. That's just plain cool. I'd say my only real complaint with the game to this game is that there weren't as many interesting missions as before. I missed all the wacky stuff you did in previous games, as opposed to these surprisingly grounded missions in Thieves in Time. Although I suppose that comes with the territory of having more of a platforming focus. The scenarios in the first game were pretty grounded, but there's really only a few that stick out in Thieves in Time. Like the one where Murray has a dance in a geisha outfit to distract a bunch of guards. Even Ryoichi is like, what the hell's going on? They know their audience? Yeah, this was weird. Also, I'm like 50% sure Murray just disguised himself as a prostitute. What even is a geisha? Oh, apparently that's a common misconception in the West. Was that supposed to be the joke? I don't know where I'm going with this. You end up doing this minigame a second time near the end, but it's Carmelita belly dancing. They certainly know their audience.
Possibly your best plan ever, Bentley.
Oh, they're not even subtle this time. I also like the one where Murray makes Bob go through a training montage and you actually play said montage. Or how about the episode 2 heist where we steal gold from a train while it's moving? I don't know, I just like the idea of having this scene in the Old West. Seriously, how are more people not freaked out about this hyper-advanced technology Bentley's got lying around? The one where we fought a robot dragon was cool, and the one where we constantly swap between Murray and Sly was pretty fun. Yeah, most of the missions aren't overly worth talking about. Not to say they're all enjoyable, because like Sly 3, there weren't too many points that I straight up disliked, so this game's actually a good successor in that sense. In general, this game just felt like a next-generation Sly game. From the presentation to the controls to the overall quality of it all, this feels like a much bigger game than the first 3. I've heard complaints about the overworlds being too big, but I don't personally see it. They're comfortably big in my opinion, and they very rarely feel empty. Although, I think I might have warmed up to the size of these worlds because of newer platformers. I remember having that complaint when the game first came out. Thieves in Time does not rehash what was already there. This feels like a PS3 game and not a PS2 game masquerading as one. If 3D platformers didn't die off during this era, this is what it would have looked like. Even the boss fights are improved. El Jefe has you use your samurai armor to avoid flames and dodging the electro attacks by taking it off. The Black Knight makes great use of your archery outfit, and the fight against Miss Decibel almost felt like more of a level at times. Sly's bosses usually got the job done, but they weren't overly noteworthy prior to this game. This time, they felt like real big fights. Kudos for recognizing an area that needed work, because it wasn't something I was particularly bothered with before. before. If they ever make a 5th game, they need bigger fights like these. They're easy, sure, but that doesn't mean they aren't fun to take down. They really improved in other small areas too. The attention to detail for one, which I already mentioned. Those treasures you find even all have descriptions now. The hideout in general has a lot more to it. Also, you can play table tennis for some reason. I mean, really, why not? The quality of life improvements were really appreciated too. You can finally skip cutscenes. Like, God, why did it take 4 games to get skippable cutscenes? You can warp back to the hideout too. Like, that is something I actually suggested in the last video. I didn't remember it being in this game, and it just felt like something the game needed. Although I did have a few minor complaints. I really wish the frame rate was more consistent. It didn't bother me that much, but if this game was a locked 60 instead of a mostly 60, the game would feel that much smoother. The load times are really long too, sometimes taking upwards of 15 seconds. I'm presuming that a big reason for this is the lack of an install. Now in 2013, when my PS3 had a 120 gig hard drive, I appreciated this. You could just pop it in and start playing. No need to wait God knows how long for it to install, an issue that plagues PS4 and Xbox One. But in 2020, when I have a fast 1TB drive installed on the same system, I really wish you could install the whole game to the hard drive like you can on 360. Despite the long load times, this isn't Sonic 06. The load times aren't annoying, and that's an important distinction. Once everything's loaded, it's loaded. And the only time there's a huge loading screen, from what I could tell, was leaving the safe house. It's okay otherwise. But between the frame rate and load times, you could easily fix these with a remaster. They're not really a deal breaker. But for some reason, when you upgrade Bentley's bomb to have a bigger radius, it doesn't show the bigger radius and you end up one-shotting yourself pretty frequently. That's weird, but another thing is easily fixable. And the game could really use more subtitles. They were only there doing cutscenes, but not the animated ones. I'm not hearing impaired or anything, but this game came out in 2013. It's pretty unacceptable how much dialogue doesn't have subtitles. But seriously, this game is legitimately great. It was pretty hard to remember why I didn't like this game in my first playthrough, but I knew exactly why I, and many others, were disappointed by Thieves in Time. Let's finally talk about the awful story. So, okay, other than some slightly neutered characters, Thieves in Time's story works well enough. A bit cartoony at points with the whole time-traveling, globe-trotting adventure thing, but Sly's always been cartoony. It fits. But episode 4 is where things start to go downhill fast, and it's all centered around the Black Knight, the villain for this episode. Now this is a menacing dude. He does his job well. The screen shakes as he walks around, he's got guards always following him, and he just looks out of place. Most of the villains in this game look out of place, but it's a good thing. They're terrorists from the future. I like that. But no matter how hard he tries, Bentley can't find anything on this dude, so his identity is a total mystery. Near the end of the episode, you find out who the Black Knight is. Why, none other than Penelope. Yeah, Bentley's girlfriend, who's a pretty prominent character in the last game. Bentley feels betrayed by this revelation, subsequently gets depressed for a bit, and the rest of the gang has to figure out how to take Penelope down without him. The build-up to it was great too. Bentley goes through one of her labs, eavesdropping on her the whole way. She mentions that the Black Knight is the reason why Paradox had Bentley's time machine plans, and implies that Penelope was kidnapped, or worse. And all of a sudden, this is way more personal for Bentley, and vows to take him down himself. Oh man, do I feel bad for him. When I first played this game, I had to stop playing to take this all in. I legitimately thought this was a great plot twist. It was honestly on par with finding out who the precursors were in Jak 3 for me. I seriously couldn't believe it. But then I thought about it. I seriously couldn't believe it. There is no reason why Penelope would do this. She was the Black Baron in Sly 3, so this wasn't completely out of left field or anything, but the Black Baron was the one villain in Sly 3 that didn't feel like a villain. She didn't even do anything wrong other than maybe cheating in her own competition. But terrorizing a bunch of medieval Europeans, yeah, that's definitely evil. Later, after no one can come up with a better plan than blow up her front door and rush in guns blazing, her reasoning for this still doesn't make any sense. Intimidation? Fear? Was she kidnapped and forced to do this? She was already captured by Lafouille. That makes sense. No. Money.
Huh?
Basically, she was upset with Bentley's wasted potential, teaming up with Sly for honorable thievery or something like that, when he could have made billions in weapon design. What? She even thinks Sly's methods are naive and stupid, despite the fact that she had a thing for him before Bentley. Again, What? No, this is straight up stupid. Not to mention that she's a snotty bitch in this game, as opposed to the calm and collected personality she had in Sly 3. Just look at her movements and aneurysms in cutscenes. She wouldn't do this stuff in the last game. I find it hard to believe that this is even the same character. Like, yeah, the main cast didn't entirely feel like themselves in Thieves in Time, but they had it easy. Penelope almost feels brainwashed, and also she only agreed to join up with the Paradox as a means to an end. What does that even mean? I mentioned last time that there was one point that made me stop playing on a second playthrough, and this is it. Not some dumb gameplay sequence, no difficulty spike, and nothing relating to the gameplay. It's almost insulting to longtime fans. Penelope wasn't the deepest character or anything, but she was likable. Thieves in Time threw that all out the window for seemingly no reason. I just can't wrap my head around why they do this in the first place. Why just throw out a good character like this? Although when I got to this point during my latest playthrough, it made me just go, really? That was it? That's why I couldn't finish this game a second time? It might just be that the dust in my soul has finally settled or something, but even this massive fan disservice didn't bother me that much. It doesn't make this plot any less dumb, but honestly, I think I've just moved on by this point. I enjoy the gameplay, so I can look past the bad story. Although a really nice detail about this is that the picture Bentley has of Penelope in his Binocucom is now scribbled on. Like, dude, I just love that. But that wasn't the only bad part of the story. The ending is just as bad. So, at the end of episode 5, you finally find the time machine that Penelope sold out to the Paradox for. You saw it previously, but you find a giant docking port for this thing hidden behind this weirdo door. Again, they know their audience. But after Miss Decibel beats up Salim and Sly subsequently beats up Miss Decibel, Carmelita gets kidnapped by the Paradox. How? Is this not the same woman who shot up a robotic dragon by herself? The same woman who beat up a previously multi-phase boss like it was nothing? May I also add that Carmelita rescued them when they got kidnapped back in the Old West? Sure, she was helped by Tennessee, but let's be honest, she could have done it by herself, sans gameplay excuses. And I know that she doesn't have her shock pistol on her, but that's the thing. Why is she unarmed? She was the distraction, have mercy YouTube algorithm, but her not even bringing it with her sounds a bit far-fetched. But anyway, dumb plot hole aside, her and the Paradox head back to the present. We have to go rescue Carmelita's ass. Although I should explain how contrived of a motivation the Paradox has. Alright, so this dude is from another family of thieves. Okay, sure. His father was supposed to steal this big old diamond from a museum, but Sly's dad stole it before he could, and Paradox's father was put in prison. Since the Paradox had no one to teach him the family business, he got caught pretty easily. In prison, he ironically gained his thieving education, and started up a crime syndicate after his release. In the shadows, of course, because he painted himself as an esteemed art collector traveling around the world, but in reality, he was in charge of trafficking priceless artifacts. He blames the Coopers for what happened to his father, so he vowed to completely wipe them from history. But the stupidest part about his plan was that he first had to prove that he is the greatest thief who ever lived. So how does he do that? By stealing the Cooper canes. Look, Sly explains this better than I ever could.
Ask yourself this. If the Coopers were truly the greatest thieves in history, and I have stolen their most valued possessions, then what does that make me?
An idiot? You had it made. You could have been the biggest thief of all time, but you had to target my ancestors and blow your own cover. You exposed your operation because of your ego. No Cooper would have done that. And for the record, can you really say you stole the canes? Seems like your friends did all the real work.
The game is pointing out its own plot holes now. I don't even have a witty response to this. That's just sad. Oh, and he apparently forged some documents and gave himself royal ancestry or something, so now all of Paris is modeled after him. Fine, whatever. The Paradox is a pretty weak villain overall. He's at least menacing, but he's blatantly weaker than Sly is. Carmelita could probably kick his ass with her hands tied behind her back. Seriously, how did she become the damsel in distress? The Paradox feels more like a Saturday morning cartoon bad guy, not so much some legitimate criminal like in previous games. I really don't care for him. Yeah, he's a total dickwad of a person, but that doesn't make him a likable villain. But anyway, Sly gets briefly captured, and Bentley gathers up all the Coopers to steal their canes back. Okay, so while the final episode is only one mission lasting about half an hour, I have to admit, this is an enjoyable final level. It's mostly platforming. In the final mission, took long enough. After putting history back in place or whatever, Paradox's time machine starts to implode on itself, but Sly decides that he needs to fight the Paradox anyway for some reason. Seriously, why does he even do this? There's no reason to. You just have to wait for the Paradox to get sucked into the time vortex and probably forgotten about by history. But no, Sly has to defend his family's honor, or something. I think he's been hanging out with the Galloth too much. The final boss sucks. With how elaborate and big the rest of the bosses felt, this one is literally just a quick time event. Seriously? That's the best he could come up with? After Sly very easily defeats the Paradox, he manages to steal his paraglider.
You won't get away with this. I'll find you.
Is this game a parody of itself now? What kind of delivery was that? I say as my voice cracks. Like, with how good the voice acting is in this game, this sounds like a warm-up line that somehow made it into the final cut. Look, I'm not a voice actor or voice director or anything, but I just found this line and delivery bizarrely out of place for something that's supposed to be serious. But anyway, the Paradox escapes for a whole 5 seconds before getting hit by a plane. I'm not making that up. The story is turning into a parody of itself. With the Paradox in prison and the Thieves raccoon is back to normal, Sly is nowhere to be found. When the days turned into weeks of him being gone, they just had to face facts that he wasn't coming back. Murray enters the pro wrestling ring to keep his fighting skills sharp, and Cormally and Bentley keep looking for him. God damn, girl, where's this fighting spirit back in Arabia? Bentley's search brings up nothing. While he does have a time machine, it's not much help since they don't know where and when Sly even is. And Penelope has escaped from prison apparently and sent Bentley a bunch of weird postcards. Totally not ominous or anything. After getting every trophy in the game, you unlock a secret ending, teasing the next game. Sly wakes up in ancient Egypt with the time tunnel dismantled behind him, and that's it. This is now how the Sly series ends.
It would seem this game is finished. How boring.
In a recent interview, there was apparently a DLC episode planned taking place in ancient Egypt that I would assume was going to tie up loose ends. This was completely planned out on paper, but due to low sales of Thieves in Time, Sony never greenlit it. I'm not exactly defending locking the story's resolution behind DLC, but if that's how it had to be, it would have been better than nothing at all. Sly Cooper Thieves in Time is the only game I've played where I was disappointed not because of bad gameplay, but because of a bad story. And I think I know why. You don't rag on Mario for having a bad story because it doesn't have one. Peach got kidnapped by Bowser for the zillionth time, who cares? It's just an excuse to go on an adventure, nothing more. But Sly Cooper has a lot more cutscenes than your average platformer. They didn't have the most intricate or deep stories around, but they did have one, and they were told pretty well. The characters had personality too, and you grew attached to them. So when Thieves in Time comes around and ruins the conclusive ending Sly 3 had and replaces it with a cliffhanger that still hasn't been resolved, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Thieves in Time has Mass Effect 3 syndrome. The game is great, but the story goes so off the rails and bad near the end that it's all people remember. And hey, they neutered the main cast personality-wise, but that's something that I can mostly forgive. It didn't affect my enjoyment that much. Although, while the game is great in its own right, it didn't make use of what made Sly special in the first place, including the gameplay. The game just doesn't emphasize stealth as much as the other games. The great thing about the previous entries is that it made you feel like a thief. I've been trying to avoid saying that, but that's really the best way to describe it. You steal stuff from villains, you pull off heists. This is a platformer about being a thief. Thieves in Time doesn't make you feel like a thief because of that lower emphasis on stealth. Sly Cooper wasn't afraid to explore darker themes either. Sly's family gets murdered right in front of him. Bentley gets paralyzed from the waist down while his friends couldn't do anything to help him. Sly Cooper may be kids games, but they weren't quite as happy-go-lucky as other platformers. Thieves in Time doesn't do anything like that. It's much more lighthearted, with a villain that feels ripped straight from a Saturday morning cartoon. So while I surprisingly love this game despite these issues, it's still my least favorite game in the series. A great platformer, but it just doesn't feel like a Sly game at times. Also, there's a Vita version for some reason. I don't know what possessed them to even make this port, but it's a shockingly good one. The awesome presentation took a hit, obviously, but if this is somehow your only way to play this game, it's not a bad option. This game was cross-buy too, so if you bought the PS3 version, you got a digital copy on Vita, and since it had cross-save, it meant that you can upload your save data and download it to the other version and keep playing on the go, assuming you had the foresight to do so. We take this kind of thing for granted nowadays, the Switch and all that, but back in 2013, this was mind-blowing. I was a weirdo that actually had a Vita, so that meant that I could find collectibles away from the TV, and that's badass. Kudos to these guys for figuring out a way to make this process as seamless as it could have been back then. If you have both a PS3 and Vita, just buy the game digitally on PS3. The load times are a bit better, but not by a ton from what I've heard. And you get both versions, only $10 nowadays too. And if you want more of the hacking minigames, there's this standalone Bentley's hack pack for $3. I haven't played it, but it seems pretty self-explanatory. Vita tangent aside, is just like they say, time heals wounds. I had just about the same issues as I did before, but I no longer mind them. I was expecting this to be the low point in the series, and okay, it kind of is, but to my surprise, I had a blast playing it. I love the gameplay and how committed it was to evolving the series. They could have just done what was already there, but they chose not to, and that's really commendable and appreciated. I did have a lot of issues with Thieves in Time, but they were mostly issues with the story. The game here is a shockingly good one, but that story definitely puts a dent in the overall package. Finishing Thieves in Time just isn't as satisfying as the other games, which is a shame because if it wasn't for that bad story, I don't think that this game would have had such a bad reception among fans as it did. There was a great game here, you just have to look past the plot to enjoy it, which you shouldn't have to. If you had a similar experience with this game on release as I did, pick it up again. You might find yourself really enjoying it this time.
And that was Sly Cooper. What else can I really say about these games? I mean, have you seen how long these videos have been?
It's been 7 years since a new entry in this series, and since then, not much has happened. Vita ports of the original trilogy, a cancelled movie, a TV show that's been in production hell. As much as it pains me to say it, this series is dead. Thieves in Time sold horribly, and because of it, that cliffhanger probably won't get resolved. The only way I could really see this series getting a revival at this rate is if Sucker Punch came back and did it themselves, which also seems pretty unlikely. Very recently, an interview with the lead designer at Sanzaru said they'd love to do another game, and if they put as much love and care into it as Thieves in Time, I'd be down for that. Son of a bitch, Sanzaru got bought by Facebook, the dream is dead. Until we get any concrete details, Sly fans don't have anything to look forward to. Maybe a Sly collection on PS5 with all 4 games would help stir up interest. And like I said, Thieves in Time could really use a remaster to fix up some of the technical issues. Seeing these games in 4K at a locked 60 FPS with nearly instant load times would be orgasmic. But alas, that's probably just a pipe dream. Although, 3D platformers are starting to come back. With Crash Spyro and A Hat in Time selling well, 3D platformers aren't dead yet. I feel that a new game, or even remakes of the first 3, would sell moderately well with proper marketing nowadays. But even without a new game on the horizon, what we do have is one of my favorite series of 4 great games, and this may be coming from a fan who's accepted the series' death, but that's good enough for me. So, this has been Flame Guy. Whatever happens with this series in the future, if there even is one at all, it's been fun looking at these games, especially Thieves in Time. That's one of the cool things about making these videos. If it wasn't for this weird hobby of mine, I wouldn't have appreciated it like I do now. Even if these videos don't get very many views, doing this made me love one of the most disappointing games I've ever played, and I wouldn't trade that for the world. Take care, and I'll see you all next mission.